Welcome back, everybody. It's time to do some more time wheeling or whatever. And this is the second Shadow Rising video. We're going to talk about chapters 7 to 16 with maybe a short flashback to something I forgot to talk about yesterday, but I'll just mention it for a second before I get too distracted. I might do an entire video on that subject once I've gotten deeper into the series and, heard more about it. We will see. I just wanted to mention it because I forgot to talk about it yesterday. However, let's get started, shall we? Cheers. Alright, so that much happening. I mean, there's a lot happening this time around, but also not that much. This is something that I find interesting. It's like, maybe it's just my imagination, but since this is obviously a longer book, it feels like the pace has slowed down markedly at this point, compared to how much happens in previous books at the same point, right? This is like, I'm 1/4 into this novel at this point. And everyone is still in tier and just about to leave tier, so that's slow compared to earlier books. But then again, we do have a lot more time on our hands, so there's that. Alright, first of all, let's do the short flashback. I didn't talk about the Shan-chan scene in chapter 1 of the book, and I just plain forgot to talk about it yesterday, and then I got annoyed about something. And then I remembered that, yeah, fuck, I forgot to talk about the Shan-chan. Anyway, my point is, we get a bit more Shan-chan, and this time we actually get Lady, I want to say Surat, but it's a different name, I think. Hi, Lady Surat, or something similar. We kind of get her perspective. It's a very short one. They're like out there on those islands, planning another attack on the mainland, because, all that stuff. And my short point there was that it's nice to see that they are still in the game, to build up that threat, so to speak, similar to, the threat that we've seen with the White Cloaks and Padan Fane, who is now Mr. Ordith, Master Ordith, totally not Mordeth, to see that there's other threats out there. That makes a lot of sense. I still maintain that the Shan-chan are a very unfortunate Orientalist stereotype, and a lot more of them. And that's sort of where I think I should probably actually make a separate video on those kind of things. I just feel I should probably wait a bit more. Wait until I've gotten like a few more books under my belt, because if I go out now and explain how Orientalist those cliches are, and like how terrible the Shan-chan in that regard are, probably a lot of you, like, more experienced readers, if you don't share my opinion, will just come and tell me that I should read and find out, and that I'm totally getting it wrong because I haven't finished the book series. And that's obviously something that I try not to do, because even though I already have a lot of, opinions and impressions, and I don't think they will change that much, if you make strong claims, you'd better be able to back them up. And saying, yeah, I've not read the next 10 books does not feel like I'll be able to back that up. So that's why I'm still waiting. Right now, it's not a good look. And the way it is described is, once again, peak Orientalism. I'll just say it that way. It's peak Orientalism with all the stuff that is connected to that. And it sucks. So yeah, Shan-chan still suck. And I'll get back to that in a bit. I have just gotten myself a audiobook of Orientalism by Edward Said, and Said, however you pronounce him. Anyway, to do a bit of a reread, so I can actually point to specific quotes and shit if I want to make that claim stronger. So there's that. I am collecting my ammunition, is what I'm saying. Now let's actually get into the part of the book that I want to talk about today. And I'll say this, most of it, like, the actual plot and stuff, the setup for those things is really solid. If not more so, there were some really good scenes in here that I really enjoyed. There's actually good stuff here. So far, this is probably my favorite. I mean, apart from those bits in White Tower in Dragon Reborn, this is probably so far the best of the lot. But, and we're going to the but later on, that is once again gender roles, stereotypes, sexuality, that shit. Because yeah. However, let's get started. The first chapter that I looked at today is like playing with fire, which is, on the one hand, something that I enjoyed, which is the sort of them trying to figure out how to actually teach Rand how to use the One Power. That bit, compared to the training montage in the first Mistborn novel, Eternal Empire, is that the first one? That one. In the first Mistborn novel, when you have Vin and Kelsier doing their like training montage kind of thing, this one was actually really cool because you have two characters that don't know how to do stuff and trying to communicate and figure out how to do things. That was well done. I enjoyed that. On the surface, there are implications in there that I personally find difficult. And they tie back into the whole gender stereotypes thing, because, we have the whole Sidene being, the male side of the true source, and Saidar. Every time Michael Kramer says it, I think cider, and I'm like, oh, they're all drunk. That makes a lot more sense now. But this is obviously not the case. So cider and whatever it is the guys drink, Sidene and Saidar linked to gender, is already like, it's a world-building decision. It's an interesting one. You could do a lot of interesting stuff with if you feel like it. I don't think Robert Jordan is doing it justice. And one aspect that we see here is the idea that for Rand to wrestle with Sidene is all about like planning. It's the rational thing. He has to get rid of all his emotions to create the void and then grasp the power and force his will onto it. Whereas for the girls, when they try to channel Saidar, it's the rosebud, and they open themselves to the power, and it's way more about emotions and whatnot, which is, well, it's a fucking gender stereotype, is what it is. And I don't like those, is what I'm saying. And there's more of that stuff in here, and it's part of that definitely is, the times it was written in, and Robert Jordan, not being your Ursula K. Le Guin or other like authors that actually tackle gender stereotypes and questions of gender in general. He's just like, women are women and men are men, and this is my book, and where women can still be women and men can still be men, and I'm aware enough to give women some power, but it's still fairly set in stone. So yeah, and that's what I wanted to call out. It's like, I don't want to call Robert Jordan a misogynist at this point. I will say there are a lot of like stereotypes and gender stereotypes in here that can be harmful, or that are, propagating those kinds of stereotypes. The whole like men from Mars and women from Venus. There's no communication between gender. That's, I think, is the key of my criticism of this part, and probably the largest part of the series so far, is that there are fundamental differences between men and women, for whatever that means, and they make communication between those two genders impossible, or at least very, very difficult. And that's a very, harmful stereotype to keep pushing. That's a very harmful narrative to keep pushing. Because it only works if you assume that gender is binary, which, nope. And apart from that, also kind of makes it look like communication, or like actually, you know, that there are some hard borders of communication and understanding between genders, and that's accepting that that is the case is basically giving up on communication in general and is harmful as fuck. And B, it's wrong. That's not the case. And that's sort of something that is unfortunately built into the world, and it kind of becomes more and more of an issue for me. Then, but we're getting back to that later on. I mean, I feel this is going to stay with me, unfortunately, I assume. However, as I said, the training montage bit is pretty cool. The question why Rand's first act of showing his power is to sexually harass Elaine by, well, pinching her ass is, I don't know, is a choice, I would say. But that's sort of the other part of this. I mean, the whole chapter is also about the Rand, Elaine, Egwene kind of relationship thing, and has these weird sexual overtones that are so prevalent in this part of the Shadow Rising, with Berelain is her name, with Berelain being the unfortunate victim of the whole chapter, of those whole chapters, right? That's something that I find highly problematic in general. But there are weird sexual overtones throughout these couple of chapters, and if I've learned one thing from that, it is, as some of you have already said in the comments, Robert Jordan's sexuality is pretty fucked up. There are some weird, weird kinks, and not so much the kinks, but the, I mean, whatever kinks are kinks, I don't care. But he's got some things to work through, and he does that in a weird way here. And it is fairly cringy, especially since a lot of the other stuff that happens gets kind of pushed into the background by this weird, like, who gets to marry or cuddle whom? As like, is this like is this romantic fantasy now? Is this like the big Wheel of Time dating app or whatever? It's like, who gets to fuck whom? I don't know. It's just weird. But it is what it is, and maybe this will change now that everyone is sent off in all kinds of groups, and hopefully we'll have different things to occupy themselves with. I hope. So, let's look at the sort of interesting things. There is, of course, that huge battle that we need to talk about, right? I mean, I'm picking events here. I don't want to go through it like plot point by plot point, because as I said, they're standing there. They're still sitting at the Stone of Tear. They're kind of dawdling and not getting off their asses, because of course they don't, because the Two Rivers people are not good with, making decisions. And then, well, the dark side attacks again. And then Rand beats it back, and that's sort of when everyone realized that, yes, this is not a game, and this is not a drill. We should probably get off our asses, and that's what happens. So, yeah, they do that. That's where I ended today with the chapter Leave Takings, when we have several groups that go for several points on the map to have adventures. So hopefully they'll be occupied with other stuff than just figuring out who gets to sleep with whom. So let's look at that battle, and one thing that I am thinking about a lot. I don't like Robert Jordan's way of writing battles. Well, not so much the way of writing battles, but I don't like his magic. I mean, it's once again like a question of scaling stuff, I feel. So what happens, obviously, is that all these people, like, he talks to Landfire, and Landfire finally tells him that she's actually Landfire, which we're going to get to that in a bit. And that's actually fine. I'm okay with Landfire. She's cool. Sort of, I guess. But, so while he's talking to Landfire, once again, one of those soulless come in and try to kill him, and he kills that soulless, and then he walks out, then the entire stone is under attack, and there's like hundreds and thousands of Trollocs and Murdrol, and mayhem ensues. And I'm like, yeah? We're not really talking about how it's possible to just send in those grain barges and nothing will happen, no one notices anything. But it's like, once again, we're talking about like huge battle in this place, and it kind of goes back to what I said like early on. It's like if you start like the second encounter with Trollocs is already with like over 1,000 Trollocs in Shadar Logoth. It gets very, very difficult to scale back to like all kinds of things. So we can basically only go upwards in numbers, and that's sort of what he does here. There's like dozens of Murdrol and hundreds, if not thousands, of Trollocs. And at some point, Rand just uses that magic sword, that Kalendor, that is that weird Angreal, Ter Angreal, no, it's a Sangreal, and blows all of them to Kingdom Come. And I'm like, dude, that's too manga for me. That's too anime for me. I like my magic kind of subtle. Or if it's like non-subtle, it should be extremely dangerous to everyone involved. And Rand just sits there and is like, bam! All the evil people die! And then they just get hit by lightning, and I'm like... I mean, yeah, I know I'll probably learn more about the true source and all of that stuff, and I'm fine with that, but it just doesn't really capture my imagination. In a way. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but it feels too technical for me. I've never been a fan of hard magic systems. Now, this is obviously not really a hard magic system in the way that, you know, your Brandon Sandersons define it. It's more like you draw power and then you do fancy shit with it. There's obviously more to it with the whole like 5 elements crap that is not fully explained so far, but that's about as hard as it gets. But I don't know, it still feels too technical in a lot of ways, if that makes any sense. I don't know, it just doesn't feel fantastic enough for me personal. But that is very much my personal taste, and not something that I will lay at the feet of Robert Jordan and call him a bad author for that. It's not me. It's not my kind of magic. But, so yeah, that whole setup worked well, as I said, like, to have, like, them attacking and then finally everyone realizing that they should actually get off their asses and get stuff done. I'm fine with that. It works. It's a decent setup. Then having the group split into these like 3 groups, Perrin, Loyal, and Fail, apparently going to 2 rivers, fine. I guess after... We're going to talk about like a really cool bit of a scene. Like Matt Avienda, who kind of becomes a more important character through like I don't know what, and Egwene going to the Aiel Wastes as the 3rd group. Although at where I am at right now, Egwene doesn't really know that Matt got told by the weird portal quiz thing that he should also go there. So I assume that will be the 2nd group. Then we have Nynaeve and Elaine going to Tanchico to do whatever they're wanting to do there. And I have no idea what Rand is planning to do. I assume at some point he'll confront Seanchan? Probably? Possibly? Who knows? But, you know, that's sort of what I'll find out in the next couple of chapters. So I'm not guessing on those. But having, like, those groups split up, it's fine. That's really cool. I'm looking forward to some of those. Like, I'm literally... for the first time, kind of looking forward to finding out what happens to some characters, especially Perrin. Perrin's cool. Obviously, the kind of like, I can't take Fael on this, but I'll totally drag Loyal back into the ways, because why not? Is a bit of a macho thing, but Fael has enough, you know, guts or strength of character to actually go against that and kind of... I don't know. get get her will, so that's kind of fine. So Perrin and a bunch of Aiel and Loyal and Fail marching to the two rivers and killing White Cloak sounds like a fun time for the future. So I'm looking forward to that bit. Yeah. Tanshiko, I don't know. Doesn't sound like an interesting place, or no. It sounds like this will be really awkward because it could be, again, one of those things where Robert Jordan just fucks up when it comes to describing cultures, because that's another thing that he's not really good at. So I'm a bit more wary on that account. The Aiel Waste thing with Matt and Avienda and Egwene, I assume will be cool, because I do so far very much like the whole dream world. Does the dream world need that dumb name that it has that I have already forgotten again? No, it doesn't. But the dream world stuff I like. It's a cool concept. It's something that is, well, not unique, but it's certainly something characteristic for Wheel of Time at this point, that there is that parallel world where people can have adventures in their dreams that can also be power, all kinds of other things. Speaking of which, probably one of my two favorite scenes in the chapters that I read today is Egwene wandering through that museum in Tanchico, because I've known for a while that obviously this is supposed to be far in the future or past, because it's the wheel and it's turning and whatnot, of our world, sort of, maybe. I've known that for a while, right? But this time with the museum, it kind of gets actually shown in a really cool way, and I like the point when she just sees that Mercedes logo star, and the way it's described, and I could immediately, bam, this is a Mercedes star, and then he actually goes like, she could feel the vanity and pride radiating from 10 feet away, and I'm, wow, what happened, Bobby J? You suddenly showing a spine and having opinions. I'm fascinated. That was just really cool. That made me smile, and yeah. As I said, I'm trying to point out the good bits as well. So that one, thumbs up for Bobby J dissing Mercedes owners. That's pretty cool. I like that. Just saying. So that was one of my favorite scenes so far. And then, meeting apparently Avienda's aunt, I guess, technically. Who calls Egwene to teach her magic stuff. That's really cool, because once again, I know this is going to be more and more, that the whole thing was going to scale up in all kinds of dimensions, and people actually learning powers instead of just getting, an upgrade like Rand sometimes gets or whatever. That's cool. I like that. I'm all for it. This will be fun. So that was definitely good. Let's look at the other thing that I found really cool. And that is that ter'angreal with the 3 questions. The actual scene within that thing, I'm not so sure how much I like that. Although the idea that they kind of eat emotions and whatnot, feed on emotions and give answers, sort of, from this parallel dimension is a pretty cool one. Reminded me a bit of how the fairies work in Lavi Tidar's Antimatter of Britain stuff. But yeah, that was cool. But what I actually meant is the scene when we get the whole thing through Matt. Then Matt comes out and then just finds Rand coming out of the same goddamn gateway. And then they're both talking while Moraine is coming out. That was just like handled well. That was like, apart from what happened in there, just the setup of all 3 of them walking into the same thing, because no one talks to each other, and then all 3 of them walking out again at the same time, and finally realizing that all 3 of them were in there at the same time. That was just like, that was well done. Once again, I'm trying to point out the good bits as well as the bad bits, so that was fun. I enjoyed that, and yeah, I'm good with that. So, what else was important in this bit? I think that's plot-wise, that's most of it. Let's just talk about Landfire a bit, and then let's talk about girls, or like gender and relationship again. All right. So, Landfire. Landfire Selene shows up. It's not like it was like hard to guess that Selene was actually Landfire all the way back in The Great Hunt, because if Bobby J gives us an oracle line about Landfire, and then suddenly a beautiful woman shows up with mysterious powers that tries to seduce people. Yeah, right. But it's probably not going to be someone that we haven't at least heard the name of before and had dark hints. That's how subtle Robert Jordan is as a writer, after all. So her showing up, and we kind of knew it from that scene in Dragon Reborn, when Perrin sees her through the dream to get together with Hopper, who still is the coolest character, not the coolest, but one of the coolest characters so far. Hopper, I mean. So we knew that she is Landfire, but this time she actually reveals herself to Rand. And there's something in there that I find very interesting to look at over the next. It's a question that once again I think is actually really interesting. I'm just not really happy with how Robert Jordan is exploring it so far, and that's the question of identity, right? Rand insists on being Randall Thor, and everyone else calls him Lews Therin Telamon, or Lews Therin Kingslayer, or whatever, Reborn. And they just treat him as if he was the same person before, which obviously has that question, like, does he have, like, any freedom of choice, any, like, actual personality, or is he just running the same program again and again and again? And how much of that does his, like, actual, consciousness have to do with that? If he believes he's Rand, is he Rand, or is he still Lews Therin? That's a lot of really interesting philosophical questions. But, Robert Jordan being Robert Jordan and the Wheel of Time being the Wheel of Time, so far it has boiled down to Rand insisting that he's Rand and everyone else just ignoring that fact. So, I don't know. We will see. Landfire, like, telling him that she has, like, and this is the interesting thing, that Landfire seems to have actual motives that goes beyond anything else we've seen from any of the dark side so far, so that's fine. And her helping him, at least in part, maybe, when we have Trollocs actually killing other Trollocs and stuff like that, that there is some sort of, like, thing going on, that Landfire is maybe something of a grey and not fully black character, because he does not outright want to kill Rand. That adds, like, depth, or at least the illusion of depth, to the evil side, the shadow, and so forth, that has been lacking so far, and something that I have obviously criticized before, that, like, evil sucks in this book. It still kind of sucks, but Landfire's cool. So that part was nice. Once again, I feel like the magic is too strong in this book, but that's a personal taste thing. Like, everyone is just all the time pushing people around with magic. But that's just my taste. That kind of goes in a different direction. All right, now let's go to the big one before we end this for today. And that is obviously Robert Jordan's Relationship 101, or something like it. And no, all of it, no. We obviously have, once again, poor Berylyn, who is, like, the only one in this entire group so far. Maybe apart from Fael, who we kind of see doing some things. But, Berylyn is the one that actually tries to, live her gender, live her sexuality, all kinds of things. And she gets slut-shamed by everyone all the fucking time. That's sort of where we have a problem, right? Because at this point, it is very much not only a criticism of that character, it is very much a criticism of that sort of behavior in general. And that's the problem that I have with that. It's like, you can totally have characters in a story that use their sexuality to either, get other things and use them as just another tool. That's totally fine. You can also have characters criticizing them for it. But the way Robert Jordan handles it right now is very much like Berylyn, at this point, is a despicable character, and she needs to, yeah, she gets treated like a child for doing that. Everyone hates her, calls her all kinds of horrible words, and there's no repercussions for that. Like, everyone, like Elaine hates her because there's that competition for Rand, and Fael hates her because there's the competition for Perrin for whatever reason. And they start like really base insults, and maybe Berlin thinks the same about Elaine or Fael, but we don't really know because we don't get her perspective. All we get is the other two using all those insults about her perceived promiscuity, which is then linked to her culture. And that's where we have a lot of problems, because linking sexual behavior, or like linking sexuality to a culture, is part of a lot of stereotypes that are very, very harmful. Whether it is, linked to Orientalism, and I don't want to get too political, but we know what can happen with a lot of like terrible stereotypes, anti-Asian stereotypes, for example, when they are linked to specific, sexual, to the sexual aspects of that. We know that people die, and we've seen that in other like racist ideologies. So linking sexuality with a specific culture is a problem, especially if you then outright criticize that sexual behavior. And that's a problem that Robert Jordan, once again, I don't think he does that on purpose. I think he just, not the link with like a culture and shit like that. I don't think he does that on purpose. I just think he's unaware of it, and because he has his very, very repressed sexuality, a very fairly conservative, repressed sexuality going on there, and sexual norms going on there, it comes across as that. It's an unfortunate thing, especially with, Berlin is, I guess, the first character, like female character in a long time that has like an actual agency, which is, keep her kingdom alive. She does have motives, and she tries to act on them. I like that. She's a strong character, but she's perceived as weak and just giving in to her desires. Or being false, because using her sexuality and her looks and whatnot to ensnare other people. Either way, she gets like the short end of the stick there, and I don't like that. Yeah, that's the one bit. The other bit is obviously monogamy is definitely the norm in this world, and apart from, I guess, Rand, who gets all these other girls. But from like the female perspective, it's at least there's like everyone's like always about marrying and fighting over men. That whole image that women are fighting over men is something that I find difficult to swallow, because the implications there are kind of weird. And it just makes me incredibly uncomfortable the way these things are handled. It's like, yeah, men need strong handling. And if you don't, which kind of ties back into that whole, like, there's like no actual communication. Apparently it's not possible for like any of those women to actually come to like an actual working relationship and that is, based on communication and all of these things. Apparently that's impossible. It has to be done by tricking men or commanding men or putting all kinds of pressure on them and treating them like animals. And men are fine with that or accept that. And it's that whole idea that like gender interaction between like in relationships or anything else between men and women is always competitive or almost aggressive. It's I don't know. It's just weird. It feels even older than like the late 80s, early 90s. It feels like 1950s almost in a way. And I'm like, I'm just saying, if something actually stops me or like will lead me to stop reading The Wheel of Time, it's probably that part of it. That weird gender interaction that is. built into the world. That's sort of what will probably, if I give up, that's the reason why. I think. Not the plot, not anything else, it's that bit. Anyway, to bring it back before we end here, I did like this where the plot went. I did really like that part. I'm looking forward to those things. I just really hope that splitting up the party will lead to less of the really weird and toxic relationship advice that we seem to get within these books. If that's what we'll get in the next couple of chapters, which is action, people actually finding out stuff, having adventures and shit, I'm fine with this. And yeah. On that note, I'll leave you for tonight, and I'll talk to you tomorrow, and yeah, have a great, Tuesday, I guess. Cheers.